This presentation will help you complete the first major assignment, and that's the APA Description Instructions Memo. Note that the length is 2 to 4 pages, and please stay within that range. This assignment is worth 200 points, so that's 20% of your grade. Now, the ungraded rough draft is due Sunday of week 1. There's no late submissions for the rough drafts. There is a 5% deduction in points, but you can submit the final version of assignments late. You just would lose some points every day. Now here's the business case scenario for weeks 1 and 2. Your role is editor at Parker Benson Publishing. This is a scholarly publishing firm because it specializes in fields requiring APA formatting. That would be things like law enforcement, cybersecurity, anything in healthcare, anything in psychology, anything in business. As you can see, anything in education. As you can see, it covers a lot of the popular majors. Now here's the situation. There's a PR crisis this month because another newly hired editor, not you, published an article that was plagiarized. So the corporate attorneys want to establish a paper trail to show that the corporation is not at fault if another plagiarism lawsuit occurs. They have insisted, therefore, that all editors write them a memo to define and describe the APA documentation system. This will prove that all the editors know how to use the APA guidelines. It's a typical corporate setup. The attorneys are predicting there's going to be another lawsuit, and they are preparing for it. Now, the formatting guidelines, here's how you handle the first 4 lines. It's double spaced, and you have the 2, and that's given to you. Then you put your name, then you put the date, and then a logical subject, which may be APA memo, whatever you think is a good subject. And that would be double spaced, each of those 4 lines. Your instructions on the next slide show you additional requirements. 2 to 4 pages, and this is very important. Right from the beginning, the rough draft for assignment 1, design an attractive letterhead. It doesn't need the address for an internal memo. If you put it, it's not really wrong. But students like to get creative here. They take Parker Benson Publishing and they make it in color, a bolder font, a larger font, maybe a graphic image. They make it look creative. After all, this is a creative type of business, publishing. You always use a size 12 times New Roman font. That's pretty standard for business. It's very readable. Your line spacing is single space within the paragraphs and skip a space between paragraphs. You'll use appropriate headings for each section of the memo. That's going to make it look better, and also it's much more readable. The subject line would be relevant, a concise subject line with some key words. Illustrations may be used, but they are not required. Sometimes students will do a screenshot, something like that. But again, that's not required. Now let's talk about the structure. You want a brief introduction. You'll discuss the benefits of APA, and you'll also discuss the negative consequences of not using APA. This is not a long introduction, okay? Remember, the attorneys have a specific goal here. They want a paper trail. So you, as editor, will want to do something to show in this memo that you have a plan for training your employees. There's not going to be another lawsuit under your watch because you are putting a plan in place that shows everybody under you will avoid plagiarizing. And that's the benefits of APA. If you train your employees to use it, they're not going to plagiarize. Now, you could also discuss the negative consequences of not using APA. And you can work this into a paragraph. Oh, it's usually 4 or 5 lines long. It's written very concisely, but it's here's how I will resolve the problem as editor. Now let's talk about the body of paragraphs. There's 3 sections here. So this is the first one. Briefly, keyword here, it's italicized, it's underlined. Briefly define and describe the APA documentation system in 1 paragraph. Don't write as if you're a student. What does this documentation system do to ensure that there will be no plagiarism? That's your goal. The definition, the description is not to be written as a student. If you have words like student, college, library, database, you're going in the wrong direction. Stay in your role as editor and show why this firm uses APA because of all those subjects that it publishes. So section 1 is brief. Define and describe. In section 2, you have 2 steps. First, you specifically name a book or a website. And then second, you list the relevant pages for the source. So the Writing 293 student has to do a little thinking here. What do you like? Do you like a paper copy of the APA manual, or do you prefer a website? If so, do you want it to be the UMUC website, or do you prefer Purdue or the APA? You've got choices here. So this is Linda Brender talking to my Writing 293 students. These 2 steps show me that you've given thought so that when you're going to write this research paper that is worth a lot of points, you're going to be prepared. This whole memo is setting you up to say, I know how to use APA. I know what it is now because I've had to research it to write my introduction in my section 1, where introduction was saying why it's important in the workplace to use APA to avoid another plagiarism incident. Okay, the introduction is very specific about what happened in this company and why the plan is in place to train the people who work for you. Section 1, just reviewing briefly, was a brief description, a definition of what APA is in the workplace, not drifting into you as a student and what you learned in Writing 101, that. It's you as an editor defining it as simply the system that is used for a specific reason. And then here we are back at section 2. Now you chose your book or your website. You did some research. You found what works for you. Because what works for me may not be the one that you like. I may prefer a book. You may prefer a website. You're going to make that decision. And then you'll just tell yourself and me, when I'm in that book or when I'm in the website, here's the pages I'll go to for the particular citations. And you're going to use action verbs for this. You'll say something like, go to this website or click on this website. Action verbs. Now, section 3 is a little more involved. 3 and 4 are more involved. Write action verbs to list steps for an in-text citation and 2 other citations. It could be an article, a book, a website, or a newspaper. And use this order for section 3. You'll use a heading that tells the reader, me, which you chose. Did you, first of all, you'll do the in-text citation. And then what are you going to choose after that? The article, maybe, the website. So you'll have the overall heading for section 3, citations, or whatever you want to call it, and then you're going to have a subhead for in-text citation will be your first one. Then the instructions for doing it, and then an example. Now, for the example, you're going to invent your own sources. You can make it Winnie the Pooh. You can make it John Q. Public. I don't care what it is, but you have to invent it rather than just simply copy it off of a citation machine, because then it's going to get into your head. You'll know how to do this. So remember, there's an overall heading for section 3. It'll be something like how to cite, or if you're not, if you're using more concise headings, it might just be simply APA citations. And then there'll be subheads for your 3 choices of the citations. One of them has been mandatory, in-text citation. And you are going to invent your own citations. You're not going to copy. Okay, section 4, we're wrapping up the body paragraphs. Here's where you define the 4 parts of the APA formatted research report. You'll have the title page, the abstract, the paper, and the references page. Now remember, in your memo, you're discussing abstracts. In your research project, we're going to do an executive summary. That way, within Writing 293, you are exposed to the 2 different types of abstract or executive summary, the brief overview. And we'll be discussing the differences of those 2 components. Now describe what these 4 parts should include. What does the title page include? What does the abstract do? What is in the paper itself, and what is in the references page? And then also describe how the 4 parts should be formatted. Are they double-spaced? Are they, do you have a heading for abstract? Do you have a title for the paper? What's your title for the references page? You'll give details like that. Again, 40% of the grade is on the research paper itself. 20% is on the research proposal. So before we get into that, we're going to make sure that every student reviews APA. I know you had to, study it for your Writing 101 prerequisite, but what we've found is that may have been a long time ago, or maybe where you took it, maybe that wasn't heavily emphasized. So we're all going to assume that we're learning this from the ground up. Now you'll have a brief conclusion. If there's no follow-up, this might just be a sentence or 2. The typical action close. What are you programming the reader to think as he or she puts down this memo? However, it might be better to invent some follow-up details, perhaps. A plan for training your editorial assistant, something like that. So brainstorm that if you want to get an A on the assignment. Make it creative, make it detailed, not simply something like call me or something like that. Remember, you want an action close here. You want the attorneys, not your editorial assistants, the attorneys, because that's who you're writing to know what your plans are for training. And you'll also have some sort of thing about if the attorneys need more information from you, they'll get a hold of you in some way. Brainstorm the action close that creates the final impression. And then choosing words. In this class, we don't want you to run to a dictionary. Be concise, be grammatical, and proofread. You will avoid matching words, okay? You're going to invent the details for those citations. It can be Mickey Mouse, it can be your favorite television sitcom characters, whatever you want. You can make it about global warming, but just make it clear you invented it. I put the assignments through Turnitin.com and it will detect plagiarism. And finally, 3 reminders. Don't write unnecessary words, don't write as a student, and don't plagiarize. You are writing in your role as an editor at this scholarly publishing company. So nothing like, in Writing 101, we learned to do this or that. That's not what the corporate attorneys want. They want a paper trail that shows APA memos, APA documentation, okay, and that you will communicate it to your staff. The middle part of this shows what you know, and the opening and closing focuses on the business case scenario, why this has to be written. So think of it that way. Opening and closing is the business case scenario. The middle part is the documentation system and what you are proving you know. And keep in mind, we're doing this so that you get the very best possible grade on the rest of the major projects, which is the research proposal and the research paper. So this is an important first step here. If you have any questions, please let me know. I'll be very happy to help you.